Welcome to Deep Thought. Comics are our modern mythology. Now, it's interesting. I meant to do this back when Stan Lee passed. I meant to do it then, but that was also around the time that I was dealing with that cold and everything, and I had to take a brief hiatus. But if you really think about, it was interesting when you had so many people of different races and even different political philosophies who, they were taking a minute for Stan Lee, right? And, what Stan Lee really did was really create it wasn't solely him, but he was instrumental in creating a modern mythology, right? Along with, and there were other people, of course. There were other people. But, and this isn't about him per se, but just the impact that comics have. Because if you think about it, right? They're this mythology. They are stories. Stories are very important. We learn through stories. For those who are familiar with African traditional religion, that's what the Odu is. The Odu, the stories. And what do stories do? They impart knowledge. They teach us something. I remember coming up, there was a lot of knowledge I got just from listening to a story, right? Like one of my favorite stories, right? It was about this tiger who forgot how to hunt, right? Forgot how to hunt or something. I forgot the exact thing, but he needed to be taught how to hunt. So a regular cat, started teaching him all this stuff, right? But then when the tiger tried to attack the cat jumped back, right? The cat jumped back and did a move that he hadn't shown the tiger. And the lesson of that was don't show everything you got, right? So that was a valuable lesson I always kept with me for life. That's why when a lot of people deal with me and I hit them with something new, they're like, what the heck? That's because I always hold something back. But I learned that through that story. If you look in any spiritual tradition, whether you agree that they're real or not, they're stories. When you look at the Christian Bible, how did the master Jesus teach? Right? He taught through parables, through stories. He conveyed stuff through stories. Like my favorite is the parable of the talents. And, the parable of the talents and, the meaning I got from it was always, use your talents. If you're given something, you need to use it. Also Luke 12:48, too much is given, much is required. Those are stories. If you look at it. So what do those stories impart? Behavior, all of that. Now let's go to comic books. Now they're not religious now. No, as I said, now. But keep in mind, a lot of stories that we have that are held as true and religious, and we think, oh, this really happened in mythologies. And, I know a lot of people say, well, this happened. Well, I've met people of all religions who feel like theirs happened and everything else is mythology. But we don't have to get into that, Only God knows the truth. So, but with comics, they impart something. They deal with archetypes. They deal with stories, right? Like if you look at a great example is the Dark Knight trilogy. Now that was a movie, but of course is based on the Batman comics, right? What made it it's actually a great story, a great mythology because it dealt with themes in each movie. The first theme was fear. In the second movie, the theme was chaos. And in the third movie, the theme was pain, right? But they imparted a lesson. And then, when you see these stories, when kids are told these stories, they can learn something. Like how many people have done something because they seen it in a comic book or got inspired to do something, right? It's a story. Like, I'll give you an example, Star Trek. Now that's not a comic per se. There's been some Star Trek comics, but it started off as a TV show, but it was a story. How much did it inspire? How many people decide, oh, I want to be an astronaut. I want to explore space. I want to invent something. That's why it's so much. It inspires. Stories inspire us. They tell us how to go. They provide everything. I'm going to tell you what. Here's some deep stuff. With stories, with mythologies, it's recession proof. I don't care what's going on out here. I don't care what's happening. Actors, writers will always, there'll always be some room for them. Anybody who can create a story or a mythology, something that teaches, they will always make money. That's the classic thing. What is the story teaching you? Right? Now, comics, like I said, get into it. It's our modern mythology. Like 2,000 years from now, there might be somebody arguing. There might be a cult of Superman. There might be, seriously, there might be, you might have a religion or something, and it's called the Superman. We'll just call it the Superman religion. So you're going to have a bunch of people walking around with the S on their chest, or S like pendant or something. You already have that now, really. You already have that now halfway, but for now we think it's a comic character, but we don't know. 2,000 years from now, some type of disaster which destroyed records to say, oh yeah, this was a comic character. You don't know. They might think, you know what? This guy, Superman, he had a great story, but yeah, he must have came from this planet called Krypton. We need to have a trip out there to see if we can find his home world. It might be, they might do something like that. They might say we can find his home world, and we gotta live his way. And of course, there'd be a tiny minority that say Superman didn't exist. Superman didn't exist. Of course, somebody else will say, of course he existed. He was a Eurasian young man. Right? But these mythologies, these stories, like if you look at any comic book character, they teach something. Like, speaking of Stan Lee, it was a big deal with the whole thing with mutants. Because according to legend, now I've heard something a little different, but according to the general consensus, the thought is that Stan Lee based the X-Men on the Civil Rights Movement. All right. Now, I read someplace else that wasn't really the case, but I don't know for sure. But that's what a lot of people take it as. And, Professor X was supposed to be represent Martin Luther King, while Malcolm X represented Magneto, right? But that's a mythology, and people learn from that. Okay, how do we deal with prejudice, right? These stories, especially in Marvel comics, because they dealt with a lot of issues, and I've seen a lot of issues dealt with in the comics. And especially when you have a lot of modern comics, they might look at something. I mean, there's quite a few comics out there that's dealing even with this whole political situation now, because they projected in the future, and it was always something. But you can speak on a lot of stuff right there. And of course, the whole thing is to address different issues. Different issues give you a mode of behavior. How many, like I said, the thing with Superman or Batman or any of these heroes, how many people say, look, I want to be just like that hero, right? How many people might have invented something because of that mythology? How many people might have joined the service? How many people might have found love, might have found love because they say, hey, these two characters worked it out. Hey. So that's it. That's it. And if this, if this recording survives like, future Holocaust or something like that, I just want to say this for anybody listening. Superman was a comic book character. He wasn't real. He wasn't real. That image you have, just an actor. Oh, man. So anyway, right? That's it for today. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and blessings.